you didn't notice it. Because it didn't feel big. It didn't feel life-changing. It just felt like a small decision. But what if I told you that one quiet step you took has already started changing your life? Not instantly, not loudly, but deeply and permanently. In Buddhism, they say, a single moment of awareness can shift the direction of your entire future. And you just had that moment. You're not here by accident. Something has already begun. And in this video, you're going to understand exactly why. Your life will never be the same again. 1. Every action creates a ripple karma. You may still be thinking it was just a small step, but in the understanding of karma, there is no such thing as a small step. Every action carries intention, and intention is what gives that action its power. Most people move through life without awareness. They react automatically. They repeat the same patterns. They follow habits they never question. And because of that, their life keeps returning to the same place. But you did something different. You paused. Even if it was only for a moment, you became aware. And in that awareness, you made a choice. That choice may have looked simple from the outside. No one noticed it. No one praised it. It didn't look like a life-changing moment. But internally, something shifted. Because karma does not measure how big an action looks, it responds to the depth of the intention behind it. One conscious decision can carry more power than years of unconscious living. The life you are living right now is not random. It is the result of everything you have thought, said, and done. Karma is not punishment. It is not reward. It is a reflection. You move in a certain way, and life begins to mirror that movement back to you. So when you took that step, you were not just making a decision in that moment. You were setting a direction. You were saying without words that you are ready for something different. And life responds to that. Not always instantly. Not always in ways you can immediately see. But always, without exception, it responds. This is why sometimes, after a small decision, something inside you feels different. A subtle shift. A quiet sense that something has changed. Even if nothing around you looks different yet. Because real change begins beneath the surface. Like a seed placed into the ground. At first, there is no visible movement. No proof that anything is happening. And if you are impatient, you may think nothing has changed. But under the surface, something has already begun. Roots are forming. A new foundation is being built. And when the time is right, it will rise. That is the nature of the step you took. It was not just a moment. It was a seed planted with awareness. And once a seed like that is planted, it cannot remain the same. It will grow. Slowly, quietly, but with certainty. This is why mindfulness in small actions matters so deeply. Because a single moment of awareness can redirect an entire life. You did not need a dramatic transformation. You did not need to change everything at once. You only needed one clear moment. And you had it. That is what makes this step powerful. It was not automatic. It was intentional. And intention is what shapes the future. So do not underestimate what you did. Do not dismiss it. Because what felt small in the moment has already begun to change your direction. And once that direction shifts, everything that follows begins to change with it. Step by step, choice by choice. Until one day, you look back and realize that everything began with a single decision you almost ignored. 2. Small steps create great paths. You may be waiting for a big moment, a clear sign, a dramatic change, something undeniable that tells you your life is finally shifting. But the truth is, transformation does not begin with big moments. It begins with small steps, almost invisible ones. This is where most people misunderstand growth. They believe change must feel powerful, loud, and immediate. But real change is quiet. It does not announce itself. It begins in the smallest decisions you make when no one is watching. The step you took felt ordinary. It didn't feel like a breakthrough. It didn't feel like everything was changing. And that is exactly why it matters. Because the most powerful changes in life are the ones that do not need attention to exist. Think about how a path is formed. Not by one giant leap, but by many small steps repeated over time. At first, there is no path, just empty ground. but each step presses into it, again and again, until something begins to appear. A direction, a pattern, a way forward. And once that path is formed, it becomes easier to walk. That is what your step has done. It may not feel like much right now, but it has begun something. A direction that did not exist before. And once a direction is created, your future starts to organize around it. This is how lives change. Not through sudden transformation, but through consistent, quiet movement. One step leads to another. One decision influences the next. And slowly, without you even noticing, you become someone different. This is why the Buddha emphasized the importance of the path, not the destination. Because who you become is shaped by the steps you take daily. And you have just taken a step that aligns with growth. Even if it felt uncomfortable, even if it felt uncertain, even if part of you doubted it, that is how you know it was real. Comfort keeps you where you are, but growth pulls you forward. And forward is not always loud. Sometimes it feels like hesitation. Sometimes it feels like silence. Sometimes it feels like nothing has changed at all, but something has. Because you moved. And movement, no matter how small, breaks stagnation. Most people stay stuck not because they cannot move, but because they never take the first step. You did. And that is the difference. That one step may not look like much today, but it has already started shaping the next one, and the next, and the next, until one day you will look back and see a path that was built quietly, step by step. A path that led you somewhere you once thought was impossible. And it will all trace back to a moment that felt small, but was never small at all. 3. Letting go is the beginning of freedom. There was something you released. Maybe you didn't even notice it fully at the time. Maybe it didn't feel like a powerful moment. Maybe it just felt like you were tired. Tired of holding on. Tired of trying. Tired of carrying something that no longer felt right. And so, quietly, you let go. In Buddhism, this is not weakness. This is one of the highest forms of strength. Because holding on is easy. Holding on to what is familiar, even when it hurts, even when it drains you, feels safer than the unknown. That is why most people stay attached. They stay connected to what no longer serves them. They hold on to people who no longer understand them. They repeat patterns that quietly damage them. Not because they want to suffer, but because letting go feels like losing something. But what you realized, even if only for a moment, is that letting go is not losing. It is releasing. There is a difference. Losing feels forced. Releasing is a choice. And you made that choice. You stopped holding something that was weighing you down. And in that moment, you created space. This is something many people never understand. Life cannot give you something new. If your hands are still full of the old, you cannot receive peace. If you are still gripping what disturbs you, you cannot grow. If you refuse to release what keeps you stuck, letting go is not about forgetting. It is not about pretending something didn't matter. It is about understanding that not everything is meant to stay. Some things come into your life to teach you, some to challenge you, some to wake you up, but not everything is meant to walk with you forever. And when you begin to see this clearly, you stop resisting change. You stop forcing things to remain. You begin to trust the flow. That is what you did. Maybe it was subtle. Maybe it didn't feel like a big decision. But internally, something shifted. You loosened your grip. And the moment you loosen your grip, you loosen your suffering. Because attachment is where suffering lives. The tighter you hold, the more it hurts when things change. But when you learn to release, you move with life instead of against it. And in that movement, there is peace. The step you took was not just about leaving something behind. It was about freeing yourself, freeing your energy, freeing your mind, freeing your future. Because once you let go, you are no longer tied to what was. You become open to what can be. And that is where transformation truly begins. Not in gaining more, but in finally having the courage to release what you were never meant to carry forever. 4. Suffering ends when attachment ends. There was a time when everything felt heavier, not because life was harder, but because you were holding on tighter, holding on to how things should be, holding on to how people should act, holding on to expectations that reality was never meant to fulfill. And without realizing it, that holding became your suffering. This is one of the deepest truths in Buddhism. Suffering is not created by life itself. It is created by our attachment to how life must be. You wanted things to stay the same. You wanted certain outcomes. You wanted people to understand you in a specific way. And when reality didn't match that, it created resistance. That resistance is where suffering begins. But something changed in you. Maybe not all at once. Maybe not perfectly, but enough to make a difference. You stopped demanding that life follow your expectations. You stopped forcing things to fit your desires. And instead, you allowed things to be as they are. And in that allowance, something powerful happened. The tension began to dissolve. Because suffering needs resistance to survive. It needs you to say, this shouldn't be happening. But when you stop resisting, when you stop fighting reality, suffering has nothing to hold on to. It begins to fade. This does not mean you stopped caring. It does not mean you became indifferent. It means you became aware. Aware that control is limited. Aware that change is constant. Aware that clinging only creates pain. So you loosened your attachment. You stopped gripping so tightly. And in doing so, you gave yourself something most people never experience. Relief. A quiet, steady relief that comes not from fixing everything, but from no longer needing everything to be fixed. This is a higher level of understanding, because most people spend their lives trying to control the outside world, trying to arrange everything perfectly so they can finally feel peace. But peace does not come from control. It comes from release. And that is what you began to practice. You released the need for everything to go your way. You released the need for people to meet your expectations. You released the illusion that holding on would protect you. And in that release, you found space. Space to breathe. Space to think clearly. Space to exist without constant tension. The step you took was not just an action. It was a shift in how you relate to life itself. You moved from control to acceptance, from clinging to allowing, and that shift is powerful. Because the moment attachment loosens, suffering begins to disappear. Not all at once, but steadily, quietly, until one day you realize you are no longer weighed down by things that once controlled your peace. And that is when true freedom begins. 5. Awareness transforms everything. For a long time, you were moving without noticing, thinking without observing, reacting without questioning, living, but not fully aware that you were living on autopilot. This is how most people exist. They repeat the same emotions, the same reactions, the same patterns, and they call it life. But it is not truly living. It is unconscious movement. And unconscious movement always leads to the same results. The same problems return. The same frustrations repeat. The same cycles continue again and again until something interrupts it. Not from the outside, but from within. And that interruption is called awareness. At some point, something in you woke up. Not dramatically, not loudly, just a quiet moment where you saw things differently. You noticed your thoughts. You noticed your reactions. You noticed the patterns you had been repeating. And in that moment, you were no longer inside the pattern. You were observing it. That is the shift, because the moment you can observe something, you are no longer controlled by it. Before, your thoughts were leading you. Now, you are seeing them. Before, your emotions were pulling you. Now, you are aware of them. Before, your habits were automatic. Now, they are visible. And once something becomes visible, it can be changed. This is why awareness is so powerful. It does not force change. It creates the possibility of it. You don't need to fight yourself. You don't need to control everything. You only need to see clearly. Because clarity naturally leads to transformation. When you see a pattern clearly enough, you begin to lose interest in repeating it. When you see what hurts you, you stop choosing it. When you see what brings peace, you begin to move toward it. Not because someone told you to, but because you understand. That understanding is what you touched. Even if only for a moment, you became aware. And that moment was not small. Because awareness breaks cycles. Cycles that may have been repeating for years. Cycles that most people never escape. But you stepped outside of it. You created space between you and your automatic self. And in that space, you gained something rare. Choice. The ability to respond instead of react. The ability to pause instead of repeat. The ability to change direction. This is where real power begins. Not in controlling the world, but in understanding yourself. The step you took was not just a decision. It was a moment of seeing. And once you see clearly, you cannot go back to blindness. You may still face challenges. You may still feel old patterns pulling you, but something is different now. You are aware. And awareness, once awakened, continues to grow, quietly, steadily, until one day you realize you are no longer living the same life. Because the moment you began to see, everything began to change. 6. Inner peace is greater than outer control. For a long time, you believed that peace would come when everything around you finally settled. When people behaved the way you expected. When situations unfolded the way you planned. When uncertainty disappeared and life felt predictable. It seemed logical. If everything outside was in order, then surely your mind would become calm. But life does not work that way. Because the outside world is always changing. People shift. Circumstances move. Outcomes rarely follow your exact expectations. And when your peace depends on something that constantly changes, your peace also becomes unstable. This is where most people remain trapped. They spend their lives trying to control everything around them, trying to manage how others think, trying to force situations into place, trying to predict and prevent every possible outcome. And the more they try to control, the more tension they create within themselves. Because control is an illusion. There is only so much you can influence. Beyond that, life moves in its own direction. At some point, you began to realize this, not as an idea, but as an experience. You noticed how exhausting it was to keep trying to control everything, how draining it felt to constantly adjust yourself just to manage the outside world. And slowly, something in you started to shift. You stopped trying to control every outcome. You stopped needing everything to go your way. You stopped chasing certainty. And in that moment, something unexpected happened. You felt lighter, because when you release the need to control everything, you release the tension that comes with it. This does not mean you stopped caring. It does not mean you became passive. It means you became balanced. You began to understand the difference between what you can control and what you cannot. You can control your actions. You can control your responses. You can control the energy you bring into each moment. But you cannot control how others behave. You cannot control every outcome. You cannot control the flow of life itself. And instead of fighting that truth, you accepted it. That acceptance is where peace begins. Because peace is not found in perfect conditions. It is found in a steady mind. A mind that is no longer constantly reacting. A mind that is no longer trying to force reality to match its expectations. A mind that allows things to be, while still choosing how to respond. This is a deeper form of strength. Anyone can feel calm when everything is going their way. But true peace is when you remain steady, even when things are uncertain, even when outcomes are unclear, even when life does not follow your plan. That is what you touched. Even if it was only for a moment, you experienced what it feels like to stop resisting the flow and instead move with it. And once you feel that kind of peace, you begin to seek it again. You begin to value it more than control. Because control is temporary. It comes and goes. But inner peace, once understood, becomes something you can return to, again and again. The step you took was not just about letting go of control. It was about discovering where real stability exists. Not in the outside world, but within you. And that changes everything, because when your peace no longer depends on external conditions, nothing can easily take it away. Situations may change. People may come and go. Life may continue to move in unpredictable ways. But you remain steady. You remain grounded. You remain at ease within yourself. This is not something most people achieve, because most are still chasing control, still believing that if they just fix everything outside, they will finally feel calm. But you are beginning to understand something deeper. That peace does not come from controlling life. It comes from understanding it, from accepting its nature, from knowing when to act and when to release. And in that understanding, you find a quiet strength. A strength that does not need to prove itself. A strength that does not need to dominate. A strength that simply remains. And that strength is peace. Not fragile, not temporary, but stable, unshaken by what changes around you. The moment you stepped into that understanding, you stepped into a different way of living. A way where peace is no longer something you chase. It is something you carry. And once you begin to carry that peace, your entire life begins to move differently. Not because the world changed, but because you did. 7. The present moment holds all power. For most of your life, your attention has been somewhere else, either behind you, replaying what already happened, or ahead of you, imagining what might happen next. Very rarely were you fully here, in this moment, and because of that, something important was always missing. Not success, not opportunity, but presence. The ability to actually experience your life as it is happening. The mind has a habit. It constantly pulls you away from now. It drags you into memories, old conversations, mistakes you wish you could change, and then it throws you forward, into worries, possibilities, scenarios that may never even happen. And while your mind moves between past and future, your life is quietly passing in the present, unnoticed, unlived. This is the subtle suffering most people never recognize. They believe their stress comes from life itself, but in truth, much of it comes from being disconnected from the present moment. Because when your attention is always somewhere else, you are never at rest. Even if nothing is wrong right now, even if, in this exact moment, everything is actually okay, your mind refuses to stay here long enough to see it. But something shifted in you. You had a moment where you returned. Not fully, not perfectly, but enough to notice, enough to feel, enough to pause. Maybe it was brief, maybe it happened quietly, but in that moment, you were not lost in thought. You were here, aware of your breath, aware of your surroundings, aware of what is, instead of what was or what might be. And in that simple awareness, there is power, because the present moment is the only place where life actually exists. The past is memory, the future is imagination, but the present is real. And yet, most people spend almost no time in it. They live in recollection and anticipation, while the only moment they truly have slips away. But when you return to the present, even for a few seconds, something begins to change. Your mind slows down, the constant noise softens, the urgency fades, and you begin to see things more clearly. You begin to notice what is actually happening, instead of what your mind is telling you is happening. This is where peace begins, not in solving everything, not in controlling outcomes, but in being fully here. Because when you are present, you are no longer carrying the weight of the past. You are no longer burdened by the uncertainty of the future. You are simply experiencing what is. And in most moments, what is not as overwhelming as the mind makes it seem. The mind exaggerates. It adds layers of fear, regret, and projection. But the present moment is simple. It is direct. It is manageable. That is why the Buddha placed such importance on mindfulness, not as an idea, but as a practice, a way of returning again and again to what is real. You do not need to be present all the time. That is not the point. The point is to notice when you are not, and gently come back, again, and again, and again, because each time you return, you weaken the habit of distraction. You strengthen the ability to remain, and slowly, presence becomes more natural, more available, more stable. The step you took, was not just a decision, it was a moment of returning. A moment where, instead of being pulled away, you came back. And that moment matters more than you think. Because every time you are present, you interrupt the cycle of unconscious living. You step out of automatic patterns. You create space between you and your thoughts. And in that space, you gain clarity. You begin to respond instead of react. You begin to choose instead of repeat. You begin to see instead of assume. This is where transformation happens. Not in some distant future, not in a perfect situation, but here, in this moment. Because this moment is where every decision is made. Every change begins. Every step is taken. The future you are moving toward is built in the present, not all at once, but moment by moment, choice by choice. And when you become aware of that, you stop overlooking the now. You stop rushing through it. You stop treating it as something to get past. You begin to respect it, to value it, to live in it, because you understand that this is where your life is actually happening. The past cannot be changed. The future cannot be controlled. But this moment can be lived fully, clearly, consciously. And that changes everything. Because when you live in the present, you are no longer dragged by what was or pushed by what might be. You are grounded, centered, steady. You move with intention. You see with clarity. You act with awareness. And from that place, your decisions begin to align with who you truly are. Not with fear, not with habit, but with understanding. The step you took was a step into this awareness, a step into presence. And even if it was brief, even if it felt small, it opened something, a doorway, a possibility, a different way of experiencing your life. And once that doorway opens, it does not fully close again. You may forget. You may get lost in thought again. You may be pulled back into old patterns. But now, you know. You know what it feels like to be present. You know what it feels like to return. And that knowing changes how you move forward. Because now, you have a choice. To stay lost, or to come back. To stay distracted, or to be aware. To let your life pass by, or to actually live it. Moment by moment. Breath by breath. Step by step. This is the quiet power of the present moment. It does not demand attention. It does not force itself on you. It simply waits. Always here. Always available. Ready for you to return. And each time you do, you reconnect with something real. Something stable. Something that does not depend on anything outside of you. And from that place, your life begins to shift. Not because the world changes, but because you are finally here to experience it. And that is where true transformation begins. 8. Detachment does not mean indifference. There was a time when you believed that caring deeply meant holding on tightly. That if something mattered to you, you had to protect it, control it, and never let it go. You thought attachment was love. You thought clinging was commitment. You thought that the tighter you held, the more real it was. But over time, that belief began to crack. Because what you were holding was also holding you. Every expectation you carried, every outcome you tried to control, every person you feared losing, became a source of tension. Not because love is painful, but because attachment turns love into fear. Fear of loss, fear of change, fear of not getting what you hoped for. And that fear quietly disturbs your peace. This is where many people become confused. They believe that to be free, they must stop caring. They think detachment means becoming cold, distant, or disconnected. But that is not true. Detachment is not the absence of care. It is the absence of control. It is the ability to care deeply, without needing things to stay the same. It is the ability to love, without fear of losing. It is the ability to be present, without trying to possess. And this is what you began to understand. Maybe not fully, maybe not perfectly, but enough to change something inside you. You started to loosen your grip, not because you stopped caring, but because you saw what holding too tightly was doing to you. You saw how attachment creates pressure, How it turns simple moments into something heavy. How it makes you constantly watch, constantly worry, constantly anticipate. And in that constant tension, you lose the ability to simply experience. So you shifted. You allowed things to be as they are. You stopped forcing outcomes. You stopped trying to control how everything unfolds. And instead, you began to observe, to experience, to be present without gripping. This is a subtle but powerful change, because now you can care without suffering. You can be involved without being consumed. You can love without losing yourself. This is true detachment. It is not distance. It is clarity. Clarity that everything in life is temporary. People change. Situations evolve. Moments pass. And when you accept this deeply, you stop trying to freeze things in place. You stop resisting the natural movement of life. And instead, you flow with it. This does not make you weaker. It makes you free. Because when you are no longer attached to how things must be, you are no longer shaken when they change. You still feel. You still care. You still engage with life fully. But you are not controlled by it. You are not dependent on it. You are not defined by it. And that changes everything. Because now, your peace does not rise and fall. With every external shift, it remains steady, grounded in something deeper, something within you. This is the difference between attachment and presence. Attachment says, this must stay. Presence says, this is here now. Attachment creates fear. Presence creates peace. And the step you took moved you from attachment toward presence. You may still feel moments of clinging. Old habits do not disappear instantly. There will still be times when you want things to stay the same. Times when you feel the urge to hold on. That is natural. But now, you are aware of it. You can see it as it happens. And in that awareness, you have a choice. To tighten your grip, or to release it. To fall back into fear, or to return to clarity. This is the path you are walking now. Not perfection, but understanding. Not control, but awareness. And slowly, as you continue on this path, detachment becomes more natural. You begin to trust life more. You begin to accept change more easily. You begin to experience things more fully, because you are no longer trying to own them. You are simply allowing them. This is where real freedom exists. Not in having everything, but in not needing everything to stay. Not in controlling life, but in moving with it. The step you took was not about letting go of care. It was about letting go of fear. And once fear begins to loosen, something beautiful emerges. A calm, steady presence. A way of living where you are fully engaged, yet completely at peace. Where you can love deeply, without losing yourself. Where you can experience life fully, without being bound by it. This is the quiet power of detachment. It does not remove you from life. It returns you to it, in its purest form. And once you begin to live this way, you realize something profound. You were never meant to hold everything. You were meant to experience it, and let it pass. With awareness, with acceptance, with peace. And in that way of living, your life becomes lighter, clearer, more real. Because you are no longer trapped by what you love. You are finally free to truly feel it. 9. Silence is a form of wisdom. There was a time when you felt the need to speak, to explain yourself, to defend your choices, to make others understand what you see, what you feel, what you know. You believed that if you could just find the right words, people would finally understand you. So you spoke. You explained. You clarified. You tried to correct misunderstandings, but something kept happening. No matter how clearly you spoke, not everyone understood. No matter how much you explained, some people still misinterpreted. And slowly, you began to notice something deeper. It was not a problem of words. It was a difference in awareness. You were trying to explain something to people who were not ready to see it. And in doing so, you were exhausting yourself. This is where the shift began. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but gradually, you started to speak less. At first, it felt uncomfortable. Silence can feel strange when you are used to filling space with words. It can feel like you are holding back. like you are not expressing yourself fully. But as you stayed in that silence, you began to notice something unexpected: peace. Because every unnecessary word you stopped speaking was energy you stopped wasting. Every argument you chose not to enter was tension you chose not to carry. Every moment you allowed to remain silent was clarity you preserved. You began to see that not everything needs a response. Not every opinion needs to be corrected. Not every misunderstanding needs to be fixed. And more importantly, not everyone needs access to your thoughts. This is not about becoming distant. It is about becoming selective. Selective with your words. Selective with your energy. Selective with where you invest your attention. Because words are not neutral. They carry energy. And when used without awareness, they drain you. But when used with intention, they become powerful. This is why silence is not emptiness. It is control. Control over your reactions. Control over your energy. Control over what you choose to engage with. And this control is wisdom. Because wisdom is not about saying more. It is about knowing when not to speak. You began to understand that explaining yourself to everyone is not necessary. Those who truly understand you do not need constant explanation. And those who do not may not understand, no matter how much you say. So you stopped forcing it. You allowed people to think what they think. You allowed situations to unfold without your constant input. And in that space, you found something valuable: clarity. Because when you are always speaking, you cannot fully observe. But in silence, you begin to see more. You notice patterns. You understand people more deeply. You become aware of things that words often hide. Silence sharpens perception. It allows you to listen, not just to what is being said, but to what is not being said. And in that deeper listening, you gain insight. You begin to understand without needing to ask. You begin to see without needing to be told. This is a different level of awareness, one that most people never reach, because they are always speaking, always reacting, always trying to be heard. But you stepped back. You allowed space. And in that space, your understanding grew. You also realized something important. Silence protects your energy. Not everyone deserves your explanation. Not every situation deserves your reaction. And when you give your energy to everything, you lose it. But when you choose carefully, you preserve it. You keep your mind clear. You keep your emotions steady. You keep your focus where it matters. This is not weakness. This is strength. Because it takes strength to remain silent. When your instinct is to respond, it takes awareness to pause. When your habit is to react, and it takes wisdom to walk away. When your ego wants to engage, you began to practice this. Maybe not perfectly. There were still moments when you spoke too quickly. Moments when you felt the urge to explain. Moments when you wanted to prove a point. But even in those moments, something had changed. You became aware of it. You noticed it. And that awareness itself is progress. Because now each time you choose silence, you reinforce a new way of being. A way that is calmer, clearer, more controlled. You no longer feel the need to fill every space. You are comfortable with quiet, comfortable with letting things be, comfortable with not always being understood. And that comfort is powerful. Because when you are no longer dependent on being understood, you are free. Free from the need for validation. Free from the pressure to explain yourself. Free from the constant noise of unnecessary interaction. And in that freedom, your presence becomes stronger. Your words, when you do speak, carry more weight because they are not constant. They are intentional. They are measured. They are real. People begin to feel that. They may not always understand you, but they sense something different. A calmness, a steadiness, a quiet confidence. This is the power of silence. It does not demand attention, but it commands respect because it reflects something deeper, a mind that is not easily disturbed, a person who does not react to everything, a presence that does not need to prove itself. The step you took was not just about speaking less. It was about understanding more. Understanding that silence is not empty. It is full of awareness, full of control, full of clarity. And once you begin to live this way, You realize something important. You do not need to be loud to be powerful. You do not need to explain to be understood. You do not need to respond to everything. Sometimes, the strongest response is no response at all. And in that quiet, you become something most people are not. Steady, grounded, unshaken. Because, while others are caught in noise, you have found silence. And in that silence, you have found wisdom. 10. You are not your thoughts. For most of your life, you believed that every thought in your mind was you. If a thought appeared, you followed it. If a feeling arose, you became it. If your mind said something, you accepted it as truth. There was no distance, no separation between you and the noise inside your head. And because of that, your inner world controlled you. A single negative thought could change your mood. A memory could pull you into regret. An imagined future could create anxiety. All of it felt real. All of it felt personal. Because you did not yet see what the mind truly is. The mind is not a stable voice of truth. It is a constant stream. Thoughts appear and disappear, one after another, sometimes helpful, sometimes confusing, sometimes completely untrue. But when you are unaware, you attach to them. You believe them. You become them. And this is where suffering quietly grows. Because when you believe every thought, you lose control over your experience. Your peace becomes dependent on the quality of your thinking. And thinking is unpredictable. It changes from moment to moment. But something began to shift in you. You had a moment where instead of being inside your thoughts, you saw them. Not clearly at first, just a brief awareness. A realization that a thought is something you can observe. That it appears, and you can watch it. Without immediately reacting. Without immediately believing it. And in that moment, a space was created. A space between you and your mind. That space is everything. Because the moment you can observe a thought, you are no longer controlled by it. It is just something passing through. Not something you have to follow. Not something you have to become. This is one of the most powerful realizations in Buddhism. You are not your thoughts. You are the awareness that sees them. But this understanding does not come all at once. At first it feels subtle. You may still get caught in thoughts, still react, still believe them. But now, something is different. You notice, you catch yourself. You realize, even if only after the fact, that you were pulled into a thought, and now you are back. That noticing is the beginning of freedom, because each time you notice, you strengthen that space. You make it easier to step back, easier to observe, easier to not react immediately. And slowly, your relationship with your mind begins to change. Before, your thoughts were leading you. Now, you are watching them. Before, your mind was something you were lost in. Now, it is something you can see. This changes everything. Because now, when a negative thought appears, you do not have to follow it. You can see it and let it pass. When fear arises, you can notice it without becoming it. When your mind creates stories, you can observe them without believing them completely. This does not mean your thoughts stop. They will continue. The mind does not become silent overnight, but your connection to it changes. You are no longer trapped inside it. You are no longer pulled in every direction. You become steady because you are rooted in awareness, not in the movement of thought. Think of it this way. Your thoughts are like clouds. They move across the sky, constantly changing. Sometimes light, sometimes heavy, sometimes dark. But you are not the clouds. You are the sky, the space in which they appear. The sky does not fight the clouds. It does not chase them away. It allows them to pass and remains unchanged. That is what you are beginning to experience. A sense of being steady, even when your thoughts are not. A sense of being grounded, even when your mind is active. And this is where real peace begins. Not when your thoughts disappear, but when they no longer control you. The step you took created a moment of awareness, a moment where you saw your mind instead of becoming it. And even if it was brief, it changed something. Because once you see that you are not your thoughts, you cannot fully go back to believing them completely. There will still be moments of distraction, moments when you get pulled in, but now you have a way back. You can return to awareness. You can step back. You can observe. And each time you do, you strengthen that understanding. You become less reactive, less controlled, less affected by every passing thought, and more grounded in something deeper, something stable, something real. This is not about controlling your mind. It is about understanding it, seeing it clearly, allowing it to move without letting it define you. Because you are not the noise. You are not the constant stream of thinking. You are the one who sees it. And that realization is one of the most freeing things you will ever experience. Because the moment you stop identifying with every thought, you stop being controlled by them. And in that freedom, your mind becomes lighter. Your reactions become slower. Your presence becomes stronger. You are no longer pushed and pulled by every idea that appears. You choose. You respond. You remain steady. And from that place, your life begins to change. Not because the world becomes different, but because you are no longer lost inside your own mind. You are aware. And awareness is freedom. 11. The path unfolds as you walk it. There was a time when you believed you needed to see everything clearly before you could move. You wanted certainty, a complete plan, a guarantee that every step you take would lead exactly where you hoped. You thought clarity comes first and action follows. But life does not reveal itself that way. Because if everything were clear from the beginning, there would be no growth, no discovery, no transformation, only repetition. So instead, life moves differently. It waits, it watches, and it reveals itself only when you are willing to take a step without knowing everything. This is where most people remain stuck. They wait. They wait for the perfect moment, the perfect plan, the perfect feeling. They tell themselves, when I understand everything, then I will move. But understanding does not come before movement. It comes through it. And this is what you began to realize, maybe not consciously at first. Maybe it felt like uncertainty or even doubt. But something inside you moved anyway. You took a step without having all the answers. And that step changed everything. Because the moment you move, the path begins to respond. Before that, everything feels unclear, like you are standing in front of fog. You try to look ahead, but you cannot see far. And because you cannot see, you hesitate. You think the lack of clarity means you should not move. But the truth is, the path only becomes visible when you start walking. Not all at once, not the entire journey, just the next step, and then the next, and then the next. Each step reveals a little more. Each movement creates a little more clarity. But that clarity is never given in advance. It is earned through action. This is why your step was so important. Because you stopped waiting. You stopped needing to understand everything first. You moved, even with uncertainty. And in doing so, you entered a different way of living. A way where clarity is no longer something you wait for, but something that unfolds as you go. This requires trust. Not blind trust in the outside world, but trust in your own movement. Trust that you can take a step and adjust if needed. Trust that you can learn as you go. Trust that you do not need to have everything figured out to begin. Most people do not trust themselves this way. They hesitate. They overthink. They delay because they are afraid of making the wrong move. But what they do not realize is, staying still is also a move. And often, it is the one that keeps them stuck. You chose differently. Even if it was a small step, even if it felt uncertain, you moved. And movement breaks stagnation. It interrupts the cycle of waiting. It shifts your energy from hesitation to direction. And once you begin to move, life begins to meet you there. New possibilities appear. New ideas form. New opportunities emerge. Not because they suddenly existed, but because your movement allowed you to see them. This is something you can only understand through experience. No amount of thinking can replace it. No amount of planning can create it. It must be lived, step by step. There will still be moments of doubt, moments when you question your direction, moments when the path feels unclear again. That is natural. because the path is not a straight line. It is not predictable. It shifts. It evolves. It responds to your growth. And sometimes it will challenge you, not to stop you, but to strengthen you, to deepen your understanding, to show you parts of yourself you have not yet seen. And in those moments, you may feel the urge to go back, to return to certainty, to stop moving until everything becomes clear again. But this is where your awareness matters. Because now you know, clarity does not come from stopping. It comes from continuing, even slowly, even carefully, even without full understanding. This is the difference between those who grow and those who remain where they are. Growth requires movement, not perfect movement, not constant confidence, just willingness. Willingness to take the next step, willingness to learn from it, willingness to adjust and continue. And you have already shown that willingness. That is what your step represents. Not perfection, but courage. The courage to move without complete certainty. And that courage is powerful. Because once you begin to trust your ability to move, you stop fearing the unknown. You stop needing everything to be clear before you act. You become adaptable, flexible, open to what unfolds. And in that openness, life begins to flow differently. You are no longer forcing a path. You are walking it, discovering it, allowing it to reveal itself to you. This is a more natural way of living, a more aligned way, because you are no longer trying to control the entire journey. You are participating in it, responding to it, growing with it. And as you continue, you will start to notice something. The things that once felt unclear begin to make sense. Not because you figured them out in advance, but because you experienced them. You walked through them. You learned from them. And now, they are part of your understanding. This is how wisdom is formed, not through thinking alone, but through lived experience, through steps taken, through moments faced, through choices made. And each step you take adds to that understanding, builds on it, expands it, until one day, you realize you no longer need to see the whole path. You only need to trust your next step, because you have proven to yourself that movement leads to clarity. That action leads to understanding, that the path reveals itself. As you walk it, the step you took was not just about moving forward. It was about changing your relationship with uncertainty. You no longer see it as something that stops you. You begin to see it as part of the process. Part of growth, part of becoming. And once you accept that, you become free to move, free to explore, free to step into the unknown without being controlled by fear. This does not mean you will never feel doubt again, but it means doubt will no longer stop you. It will simply be something you notice. As you continue forward, this is a different level of strength. Not the strength of knowing everything, but the strength of moving anyway. And that strength will carry you further than certainty ever could, because certainty is limited. It only exists where things are already known. But growth happens beyond that, in the unknown, in the unexplored, in the steps you have not yet taken, and you have already begun. That is what matters. You have stepped onto the path, and once you are on it, it will continue to unfold. Not all at once, not perfectly, but steadily, as long as you keep walking. So do not look for the entire journey to be revealed. Do not wait for complete clarity. Just take the next step and trust that as you move, the path will rise to meet you, just as it already has. 12. Awakening is quiet, but irreversible. There is a moment in every life that does not look like a moment. It does not arrive with noise. It does not announce itself. It does not ask for your attention. It simply happens, quietly. And if you are not aware, you miss it. But if you are even slightly present, you feel it. Not as excitement, not as intensity, but as a shift. A subtle, undeniable shift inside you. Something becomes clearer. Something becomes lighter. Something no longer feels the same. And you cannot explain it fully. This is the beginning of awakening. Not dramatic, not overwhelming, just a quiet knowing that something has changed. You may have felt it recently, A moment where your reaction was different. A moment where something that used to disturb you no longer had the same power. A moment where you paused instead of reacting. And in that pause, you felt space. That space is important because before there was no space. There was only reaction, only habit, only automatic movement. But now there is a gap between what happens and how you respond. And in that gap, you are free. This is not something small. This is the foundation of awakening. Because awakening does not mean you suddenly become perfect. It does not mean your mind becomes silent forever. It means you are no longer completely lost in your patterns. You begin to see them. You begin to notice them. You begin to step outside of them, even if only for a moment. And that moment changes everything. Because once you see something clearly, you cannot fully go back to not seeing it. You can ignore it. You can distract yourself. You can fall back into old habits. But somewhere inside you, the awareness remains. And it continues to grow, slowly, quietly, without forcing anything. This is why awakening is irreversible. Not because you become different overnight, but because your perspective has shifted. And perspective, once changed, does not return to what it was. Think about this carefully. Before, you believed your thoughts completely. Now you question them. Before, you reacted automatically. Now, sometimes you pause. Before, you held on tightly. Now, you are beginning to release. These are not small changes. These are signs. Signs that something deeper is unfolding. And it does not need to be loud. In fact, the quieter it is, the more real it is. Because real transformation does not seek attention. It happens beneath the surface, like roots growing underground. Invisible at first, but strong, steady, unstoppable. This is what is happening within you. You may not see dramatic results yet. Your life on the outside may still look the same, but inside, something is reorganizing. Your reactions are shifting. Your awareness is expanding. Your attachment is loosening. And all of this is happening quietly, without pressure, without force. This is the natural unfolding of awakening. It cannot be rushed. It cannot be forced. It can only be allowed. And that is what you are doing. You are allowing yourself to see, to notice, to become aware, even in small ways. And those small ways are not small. They are the beginning of a completely different way of living. A way where you are not controlled by every thought, not shaken by every situation, not dependent on everything going perfectly. Instead, you become steady, grounded, present. And from that place, your entire experience of life changes. Not because the world becomes easier, but because you are no longer reacting to it the same way. This is the deeper meaning of awakening. It is not about escaping life. It is about seeing it clearly, experiencing it fully, without being lost in it. And once you begin to experience life this way, you cannot fully return to the old way. You may try. There may be moments when you fall back into old patterns, moments when you forget, moments when you get pulled into old reactions. But even then, something is different, because now there is awareness. You notice it faster. You return quicker. You do not stay lost for as long. And over time, those old patterns lose their strength, not because you fight them, but because you no longer feed them with unconscious attention. This is how awakening deepens. Not through effort, but through awareness, through noticing, through gently returning, again and again. And each time you return, you strengthen this new way of being, a way that is calmer, clearer, more aligned. You begin to trust this process. Even when it feels slow, even when it feels subtle, because you realize that what is changing is not just your behavior, it is your perception, your understanding, your way of experiencing reality itself. And that kind of change is not temporary. It does not fade easily. It becomes part of you, part of how you see, part of how you move, part of how you respond to life. This is why it is irreversible. Because once your awareness expands, your old limitations begin to dissolve. You can no longer fully believe what you once believed. You can no longer fully react the way you once reacted. You can no longer fully live unconsciously. Something inside you will always notice, always observe, always remind you. And that reminder is the continuation of awakening. It does not need to be perfect. It does not need to be constant. It only needs to be present, often enough. And over time, it becomes your natural state, not something you practice, but something you are. The step you took was not just a step in your external life. It was a step inward, a step toward awareness, a step toward clarity, a step toward truth. And once you step in that direction, the journey continues. Whether you rush it or not, whether you understand it fully or not, it continues. Because awakening is not something you achieve. It is something you uncover, something that was always there, beneath the noise, beneath the patterns, beneath the constant movement of thought. And now, you have touched it. Even if only briefly, even if only lightly, you have seen something real. And that is enough. Enough to begin. Enough to continue. Enough to change everything. Slowly, quietly, but completely. So if you feel different, if things no longer affect you the same way, if you notice moments of clarity where there used to be confusion, do not dismiss it. Do not ignore it. Do not think it is nothing, because it is not nothing. It is the beginning of seeing, the beginning of understanding, the beginning of a life that is no longer driven by unconscious patterns, but guided by awareness. And once that begins, it does not end. It deepens, it expands, it becomes more natural, more stable, more real, until one day you realize you are no longer searching for something outside yourself. You are no longer chasing answers. You are no longer trying to force your life into a certain shape because you understand something deeper. That which you were looking for was never outside. It was always here, in awareness, in presence, in this quiet, steady knowing that you are finally beginning to experience. And that knowing, once awakened, does not disappear. It stays. It grows. It becomes part of you. And from that moment forward, your life is no longer the same. Not because everything around you changed, but because you did. Quietly, deeply, irreversibly. So if something inside you feels different, if you feel a little calmer, a little clearer, even without knowing why, trust that, because not every transformation is loud. Some of the most powerful changes happen in silence. That step you took, it wasn't random. It wasn't small. It was the beginning of a path that is already unfolding for you. So don't rush it. Don't doubt it. Just stay aware and keep moving forward, because what you've started is not temporary. It's a quiet shift that will continue to change your life, one step at a time.